Thank you, Nick. It's an experience that many Black Americans will never forget, the existence of sundown towns. They were created throughout the Jim Crow era and were a way to keep Black people out of the community.
Yeah, and in a special report here this morning, our Kyra Willis sits down with two people who were impacted by sundown towns right here in Illinois.
I spoke to two Springfield residents from different generations about their experience with sundown towns in Illinois that happened decades apart. And what they tell me is heartbreaking.
Southern Illinois was very sympathetic to the Confederacy, and so we were very aware.
Stacy Grundy is a native of Alexander County and grew up right outside of Cairo in the early 90s, less than an hour away from the town of Anna.
Growing up, we were always taught that Anna stood for ain't no ends allowed. And so it was always ingrained in us, and always the message was just reiterated to us that, you don't stop here unless you have to. You get in and you're out by sundown.
Grundy says when she started driving, her parents gave her the talk about sundown towns, encouraging her to avoid them at all costs.
They literally had a map for me to say, okay, if you need gas, only stop here because, these are sundown towns.
She says her first memory of sundown town racism came when one of her family friends was killed after his car broke down in Anna while traveling with his friend.
One of the guys decided to go and get help, and another guy, he decided to stay in the car and just wait. And I remember when he returned to the car, his friend was no longer in the car. And so when they found him, he had been laid on a railroad track and a train had ran over him. And so they never found out what happened to him. And we, as a community, we knew, but it was nothing that anyone can do.
77-year-old Erskine Route, a native of Mount Vernon, grew up in the Jim Crow era of segregation.
When I got to high school, there were certain teams that we couldn't play because we had colored players. So we couldn't play Pinckneyville, we couldn't play Carbondale.
As an adult, Route and his band were forced to find ways around sundown towns in order to record in a Pekin studio.
And it was on the west side of Pekin, so we had to drive on the country road around to the west side. We couldn't drive through town. Oh no.
He says this was an everyday life for him and his family, including fearing for his safety when marching with civil rights leaders against segregation.
I wasn't at the front, so I wasn't worried about the dogs and fire hoses and things like that. But you still had this anticipation that anything could happen at any time.
Both Grundy and Route say their experience is not unique, telling me many Black Americans living during the Jim Crow era can tell similar stories on their experience with sundown towns. In the studio, I'm Kyra Willis. Back to you.
Thank you, Kyra, for bringing us that important story. Now, both Route and Grundy say many sundown towns have changed for the better, but it's an important part of history that everyone should be aware of.
Don't miss a video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel today for more Central Illinois news.